Good afternoon, Joe. This is Mike Thompson calling from Southern California. Delighted to have this opportunity to share some things with you about my background and help you get to know me a little bit better. We also look forward to doing the same with you. I know I only have about 15 minutes, so let me jump in. I will walk through your questions, really going back and forth. In some cases, talking about coaching and facilitation because I've done that kind of work in the same roles internally in different organizations, but I also, when appropriate, make sure to distinguish which side of the equation I'm on with regard to specific aspects of the work. First of all, just in terms of numbers, lots of folks I've had the good fortune of working with in my 23 plus year career. I estimate that probably somewhere between 300 and 400 clients that I've had a chance to work with in my coaching engagements. Again, a lot of that internal, but over the last 4 years, a lot of external folks. From a facilitation perspective, again, both internal and external, well over 2,000. And I think both those estimates are probably conservative. From an industry perspective, I've covered a broad range. I've worked in insurance, financial services, healthcare, restaurants, transportation, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, airlines, tech, entertainment, aerospace, automobiles, and construction. And it really have had lots of different kind of opportunities. On the facilitation side, I know one of the things you want to know what kind of areas that we have facilitated in our roles. I actually did share with Sarah a rather long list of over 30 different topics that I've had the good fortune to facilitate during my career. In terms of my favorites, I would highlight 5. One is emotional intelligence. That's kind of how I got started in this work 23 years ago. Motivation is a huge interest of mine, understanding how leaders can motivate their team members to do their best work. Anything that comes under the leadership umbrella, particularly topics around leadership brand, executive presence, I find fascinating. Career management, and obviously with the internal roles that I've had over those 23 years, much of that has been around internal movement within the organization, managing change as well. And certainly there's a lot of that happening now. If you think about the world we live in now, post-COVID, plus all the things that are happening both inside and outside organizations. In terms of where I got my certifications and developed the skills, I had the good fortune of working on the coaching side with Coach U and Zinger Folkman. And on the facilitation side, I've worked with Korn Ferry and Franklin Covey. I've also done some work with the Center for Creative Leadership around their curriculum, as well as their 360-degree assessments, and also a firm called Achieve Global. These are all outstanding firms and have really instilled in me not only great content, but also some pretty good facilitation skills along the way. I also have designed some of my own content. I do have a certification in instructional design by the Association of Talent Development. You asked about sort of how do we discover the coaching needs when we work with coaching clients. When possible, I always like to do a quantitative 360 because it provides great data. I've also done qualitative 360s where I will walk around and talk to people who know the leader I'm working with and get some feedback that I can share and put together a report with the client. I've also used other assessments like the Gallup Strengths, the DISC. I am certified in the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs. I'm not certified in Gallup Strengths or DISC, but I certainly have used them in my career. The way I establish trust and rapport with clients oftentimes is through contracting. Usually for each engagement, I like to create a contract where the leader and I sit down and have a conversation about how we're going to work together. And I think that helps kind of lay the good foundation of trust. A big part of that, as I'm sure you know, is the importance of confidentiality. I make sure to ensure that any conversations that we have in our engagements are only between me and the client. The duration of my engagements have been as short as 2 or 3 months to as long as 1 year. And it depends on the client, the organization, and the need, obviously. In between coaching engagements, I like to do homework. Oftentimes that's the form of reading. Maybe there's another short assessment, self-assessment that I can share that might be helpful for a leader. I also like to make sure that they're doing some what I call on-the-job assignments. In other words, they're taking the things we discuss in our coaching conversations and identifying behaviors that they think they can improve and encourage them to go out and try those behaviors on the job. That's really the best way that people learn and grow. I also, in terms of other people who are involved in the support team, if you will, I have a document I'll share with you in the future about how I like to pull in the boss, and if there's a mentor that the individual leader has, pull that person as well, and call ourselves a support team. I actually have a document that outlines what the roles of the coach, the boss, and the mentor are in helping to provide that support to the leaders. And I found that to be an extremely useful tool to get other people involved. Obviously, I'm not going to be seeing the leader every day, and our coaching engagement will end at some point. But if I can pull in the boss and a mentor into the conversation, I can help build a lasting foundation around the leader's development. I have the good fortune of not having leaders that I've worked with that are difficult or disinterested or disengaged. When it does happen, I go back to the contracting piece, and it's something that I always make sure that we are discussing, particularly about each of us holding up our ends of the bargain. And if I have ever felt that the leader is not holding up his or her side of the bargain, the coaching contract typically has some language around providing feedback. And I'm always happy to share that feedback when I see someone who is not showing up with the level of commitment that I think is beneficial for the partnership, but also ultimately beneficial for that leader. How do I, elevate my energy? Well, hopefully you're sensing that my energy is already there. I'm really passionate around this work. Been doing it for 23 years. I've had options to internally move into broader HR roles, but I've resisted and have always stayed in talent development because I'm just fascinated with the field. Really enjoy helping leaders grow and develop their skills, particularly if I have the luxury to see them over time, which in my internal roles, I've had that luxury. And I have seen leaders gain greater self-confidence and, in fact, improve their skills. And so I find that to be just tremendously exciting work. I've taken the Strengths Finder, the Gallup Strengths Assessment, many times over the last 23 years. And every time, what shows up as my number one strength is learning, which reflects kind of, my not only my profession, but also my personality, my values, and my passion. How do I measure success? Again, if I have the luxury of working with leaders and observing them over time, I can see that sense of self-confidence. I also like to do self-assessments, and granted, self-assessments are only as valuable as you are honest in providing your assessment. But I like to ask leaders essentially to document their level of self-confidence after the start of the engagement, and then once the engagement is at the end. I also, if possible, and this is for you to do it internally, seek out third-party feedback. Get other people to share their observations of the leader and how they may have seen changes in his or her behavior over time. In the best of all worlds, and this is not always possible, I've been able to use 360s at the end of an engagement. So let's say for those longer engagements that might run 6 months to a year, if I have the luxury of having an assessment at the front end, a 360 at the front end, I'll do that same assessment at the end of the engagement. That way we're comparing apples to apples. And if I've done my work as a coach and the leader has done his or her work in terms of really committing to the partnership, committing to behavior change and improvement, committing to their development goals that come out of the 360 assessment, then what I typically usually see is there's a movement of the needle towards higher perceived skills, not just by the leader, but by all the other people who are participating in the assessment. In my mind, that's the best way to get an objective sense of the improvement that someone has experienced as a result of the coaching partnership. Finally, I would say, obviously we all have our own opportunities for growth. I'm certainly conscious of mine, and I would identify three. One more recent, I'll save that for last, obviously. But the two that I think I'm always conscious of and trying to work on is that although I've got a lot of great experience and I'm very confident in my work, I need to make sure that I'm staying grounded and not being overly confident. Obviously, when you're overly confident, sometimes you run the risk of, sort of taking things for granted. And so I try to recognize that although I've got all this great experience, great certifications, 20 years of experience, world-class companies, I need to be, humble and make sure that I'm coaching and working with clients where they are, not where I think they need to be because I have such great enthusiasm and passion. Secondly, I have been told and gotten feedback around sometimes I want to work more than the clients do, whether they're the coaching clients or the learners in the classroom. And I certainly, if you ever have a chance to see me in a classroom environment, you'll see that enthusiasm come out loud and clear. But I need to be aware that just because I'm excited about the content doesn't mean that everyone's going to have that same level of excitement about content. So something I'm conscious of and trying to be mindful of. The last thing I said that was just more recent when I reflected on for this project is that the reason that this is arriving in your inbox at the sort of 11th hour is because I had to actually go through several iterations of this to get it down to that 15-minute or close to the approximate rendering. The first couple of drafts were well over 30 minutes. I got it down to 25 earlier today, and now finally I've got it to hopefully a manageable time frame. I did let Sarah know that I was still working on it and I would get it to her and you this evening. But I don't have this issue actually in terms of time management. When I'm working with my clients, our coaching engagements and meetings always start on time, end on time. And I'm very good in the classroom in terms of making sure I'm using good time management. But when I'm talking with someone else about themselves, a coaching client, or talking with learners around content, that's a different time management. When I'm talking about myself, that's a different story. Anyway, glad to have this opportunity, Joe, and hope it's helpful. And look forward to having the opportunity to talk with you in the not too distant future. Take care.